Super Bowl era, of the 451 teams to start a season 0-2, 4 of them ended up reaching the Super Bowl. That's 0.9%. 93 Cowboys won it, 01 Pats won it, 07 Giants won it, and the 22 Bengals lost it. The Kansas City Chiefs, who many people, including me, pick blindly to always go to the Super Bowl because they always go to the Super Bowl, Sunday face the defending Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles in a rematch. Some have said this could be the biggest game of Patrick Mahomes' regular season career. I laugh at that concept. I laugh at the fact that it is even in the notes for our show today. But that said, by the numbers, if they lose Sunday, the Kansas City Chiefs have a 0.9% chance of then getting to the Super Bowl based on history. I set it up properly factually, I think. Are we laughing at this or are we taking this seriously?
Well, Josh Allen had a 0.9% chance at being able to beat the Baltimore Ravens with 5 minutes to go in that game on Sunday night, and what happened?
Yeah.
He did it.
Exactly. There are just certain outliers that are out there in the NFL, and Patrick Mahomes is the biggest one.
He's a walking outlier.
No question about it.
It's a good nickname.
The rules don't apply to that guy. They just don't. The Kansas City Chiefs could start out 0-4. I'm not going to sit here and doubt that they have the ability to right the ship, to figure out what's going on, and get to the playoffs, go on a deep playoff run. I just have that unwavering belief in them. But I will say this. The season has the potential to get late early for them because this is the 11th Super Bowl rematch that we've seen where the two teams that faced off in the big game played the following season. And it's the third straight year it's happened in the NFL. The Super Bowl champs, the defending champs, are 7-3 in those previous 10 matchups. So if history tells us anything, the Kansas City Chiefs are staring at 0-2. So what do you do as an organization? What happens? What changes are made? You have to have some urgency about going about your business. You can't sit on your hands and just rest in the fact that you have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. Yeah, we know they're great, but they need others around them in order to be able to do their job at the highest level. And that's my biggest concern about the Chiefs moving forward.
So don't ask him to have such a heavy lift all the time.
Yes.
But if you're sitting in their shoes, you're like, why wouldn't we allocate those resources elsewhere? Because we've seen him do it time and time again.
Yeah, but the allocation of those resources should have an outsized impact on your team being able to have success, and it hasn't done that.
Good point.
The defense got shredded in the fourth quarter by Justin Herbert. He was a perfect 9-9. And then on a 3rd and 14, you got a chance to get off the field, get the ball back for your team. What happens? Justin Herbert scrambles 19 yards for a first down. Next thing you know, the Chargers are getting in victory formation. So you've allocated all of those resources to the defensive side of the ball, and that was the side that let you down. So I'm sitting here looking at the Kansas City Chiefs, and the biggest issue that we're seeing with them is the turnover and players graduating out of their program and the front office not being able to adequately replace them. And so every year, teams go into a season thinking one thing about what their identity is going to be. Then they get faced with the reality that they have to be something else in order to accomplish the goal. And I think the Kansas City Chiefs, with one more loss, in week 2, or would it be at that inflection point where they have to make some changes in terms of their philosophy with the 2025 team?
Cece, what was your Super Bowl pick this year?
I think it ended up being Ravens in the Lions, yeah.
Okay, I picked Bills Packers. You said Eagles Chiefs rematch, right? We both said we're not deferring to Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs anymore. Yeah. We both said we are not going to give them the benefit of the doubt anymore that they can get back there. What we saw in the Super Bowl may have been not the outlier, but a warning sign that maybe they're not as close to some of these elite teams. And so many things did bounce their way last year. They had so many close one-score games, but that's what great teams do, right? They find a way to get it done. But Evan, I guess my question to you is, as the guy sitting on the set that picked them to go back to the Super Bowl, at what point would you stop giving them the benefit of the doubt?
Excuse me. I'm choking now. Very emotional here with this. Cece just said, I think somewhat intentionally hyperbolic, if they started 0-4, I'm still going to give them somewhat of the benefit of the doubt. If they started 0-4, I would not waver off of my Super Bowl pick. I'm not going to waver until they're eliminated. Then I'll waver. I'm going to play the result. Like, I just can't do it because my assumption is they're going to figure it out. And it's not like I don't have a body of work to work off of with this. 0-1. Okay, bad loss. If they're 0-2 and they lose to the defending Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles, am I going to write them off with offense? A Sunday night game against the Giants the next week? Well, now we're back to 1-2. Right? So now we're right back to 1-2, and who knows what happens after that. So I don't feel comfortable writing them off until they're eliminated. And I understand the question is out there now as to whether or not attrition has caught up to them, whether or not they need to make it into that second wave of a dynasty, so to speak, like we saw in New England. I just am not going to write them off.
I'm not going to write them off either, but I will also acknowledge, as constituted, they're not good enough to get back to the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
Okay, that is likely correct, but here's the other part of that. As constituted, do you believe this is the constitution of the team come trade deadline?
No.
That's the point.
No.
So we're watching a team that will not exist in late November. The group we're seeing, and we will see against the Eagles on Sunday in the Super Bowl rematch, that group will not exist in late November, how we all see it, right? So this is one of these teams that probably looks at the first month of the season as preseason.
But what type of moves do you expect them to make? I know the Tyreek Hill acquisition is out there. That's been floating. But how many?
It's important to mention that.
Well, I guess here's the question. How many moves away are they? Are they one big acquisition away, or are they 2 or 3 small ones away?
I would say 2 or 3, but let's bring that up because I've said that a million times. There are accusations right now of domestic battery against Tyreek Hill. I'm not going to comment. Obviously, none of us are on what happened because we don't know. These are allegations. The Kansas City Chiefs voluntarily trading for him, theoretically, or bringing him in with ongoing allegations could be a dangerous place for them. So that thought process, as I have said, as CC agreed with, of, yeah, go out there and bring him back because him under your roof is different than under other people's roof. I think we have to take a step back on that. I think that's a dangerous place to. What are you going to trade for a guy and he gets suspended?
Yeah, and I'm with you on all of that. I'm with you on all of that.
Truth.
I'm just going to take the domestic violence allegations out of it. If they were to trade for him and he would be available, that changes how I feel about the Kansas City Chiefs.
So that
would be the one move that changes how I feel about their season.
That's a unique move, would you? Because it's someone who he doesn't have to learn anything, and he plays at a high level. So
he's still the fastest player in the NFL with the ball in his hands.
To your question, if you're saying 2, 3, 4 people. If it's people that have never been there before, it's 2, 3, 4. If you're telling me there's a high-level player who can be an all-pro caliber, who's been there and done that, and he shows up on a Tuesday and he can practice on a Wednesday without even looking at the playbook, that's a different story. Mm-hmm. That's just like a guy who was out the first few weeks of the season who knows the team. I don't know if there are other guys. If all of a sudden the Bears fall out of it and they're like, all right, let's get Joe Tooney back. Well, that's a difference. He's been there, offensive lineman, like going to be in a Hall of Famer, won 4 Super Bowls. You get the point. If it's a been there, done that guy, that's different than, all right, we have to, like DeAndre Hopkins, personality-wise, great. Like, he didn't do anything of significance. He didn't know, it wasn't there long enough. I'm not ready to write them off. Has attrition caught up to them? Maybe. Is Sunday important? Yes. But as CC pointed out and Smalls pointed out, are we really going to say they're not going to make the playoffs if they start 0-2? We're going to say they're definitively not going to make the Super Bowl because of the 0.9% because they're 0-2?
I mean, if this is the team that they're rolling with.
That's a good way of saying it.
If this is the team that they're rolling with, they're not going to make the Super Bowl.
If Brent Veach, their general manager, and Andy Reid sit there and pass the trade deadline, this is the team, no problem with that.
Yeah.
No problem with that. All right. That's a team that we've all kind of liked. There's some other teams out there that maybe we don't like a little bit as much, and we will dive into that coming up. Like, I don't know, the Bengals we got later on.
Why do you say that? Why do you say we don't like? I picked the Bengals to be a playoff.
The Kansas City Chiefs are in a crisis much deeper than anyone wants to admit, and what happened against the Chargers in Brazil was just the tip of the iceberg of problems that have been accumulating for months. While everyone keeps looking for excuses about long travel and jet lag, the naked truth is that this team showed exactly the same flaws that cost them the Super Bowl against the Eagles. And if Andy Reid and company don't wake up quickly to reality, the 3 consecutive championship season could turn into a nightmare before December even arrives. There's so much wrong with this roster that it's time to stop pretending everything's fine and face the facts head on, because solutions exist but require drastic changes that maybe nobody wants to make. The wide receiver situation is becoming a much more serious problem than anyone imagines, and the facts are even more brutal than they appear on the surface. Rashee Rice is serving a 6-game suspension for violating the NFL's personal conduct policy, the result of a multi-car accident in Dallas where he was driving a Lamborghini Urus at 119 miles per hour, causing serious injuries and fleeing the scene on foot. He pleaded guilty to 2 criminal charges and was sentenced to 30 days in prison and 5 years probation, in addition to paying $115,481.91 in restitution to victims. Xavier Worthy suffered a right shoulder dislocation on just the 3rd offensive play of the season against the Chargers when he collided with Travis Kelce on a crossing route. According to reports, he's still undergoing tests to determine the severity of the injury and seeking a second medical opinion, with the possibility of surgery still on the table. Most likely he'll use a protective brace when he returns, but there's no defined timeline. Jalen Royals, the 4th-round rookie who was seen as an immediate option, is dealing with knee tendonitis and missed the first week of the season. This leaves Hollywood Brown being forced to carry a weight that shouldn't be on his shoulders alone. Against the Chargers, Brown ended up seeing 16 targets, caught 10 of them for 99 yards, but also had some important drops at crucial moments. It's exactly the scenario the Chiefs wanted to avoid, overloading a receiver who has a history of injuries and can't stay healthy through complete seasons. If Royals can't return in week 2, if he misses extended time beyond that, if he continues having setbacks, if for some reason Xavier Worthy has a setback, could the Chiefs bring back an old friend? Could we have a little reunion with Tyreek Hill? Man, this possibility has been circulating, and I'll be honest, it makes sense from a purely football standpoint. Connecting this Hill speculation with current reality, the serious allegations that have recently emerged make any possible reunion practically impossible. Kita Vaccaro, Hill's ex-wife, alleged in court documents 8 separate instances of domestic violence during their 17-month marriage, which began in November 2023. The allegations include specific details. In January 2024, 2 months after the marriage, Vaccaro alleged that Hill pushed her to the floor, stood threateningly over her, and ripped off her necklace, causing a cut and bruise on her neck. 2 weeks later at an Orlando hotel, she alleged that Hill violently attacked her, throwing her to the floor, twisting intimate body parts, ripping out hair, and grabbing anything on her he could get hold of. On February 7th, 2024, days before the Pro Bowl, Vaccaro said Hill shoved a marijuana cigarette in her face, ordered her to pack and leave, then threw her and her suitcase out the door before locking it. The allegations also include that he spat on her and became physical while she was pregnant. Hill's lawyers vehemently denied the allegations, calling them false, spurious, and intended as a means of extorting money from Mr. Hill. Attorney Julius Collins said the allegations are an attempt to generate bad media coverage, and that the shakedown is apparent. The defense argues that Vaccaro wants an unreasonable amount of money that we believe she knows she is not entitled to in this 17-month marriage. The legal situation is even more complicated by Hill's history. In 2015, while at Oklahoma State, he pleaded guilty to domestic assault and battery by strangulation, receiving a sentence of 3 years probation and being kicked off the team. In 2019, while playing for the Chiefs, he was investigated for battery of his 3-year-old son, but no charges were filed. In 2023, he was investigated for assault of a man at a Florida marina, but the case was resolved. The honest analysis is that the Chiefs could consider making this move from a purely football standpoint, especially with Miami seemingly heading toward a rebuild. Things don't seem to be working with Tyreek Hill there, and we know this guy could be an explosive weapon in our offense. Just look at the stats from the last 4 years, one of which was with us here in Kansas City. 159 targets, 111 receptions, over 1,200 yards in the last season he spent playing with Patrick Mahomes. Following this line of possible acquisitions, there's a trade proposal I put together, and you might be surprised at how low the price to get Tyreek Hill is at this point. Talking to people who cover the Dolphins, they said we could trade Jawan Taylor and a 5th-round pick to the Dolphins for Tyreek Hill, and that would probably get the deal done. If you're wondering why Taylor would move in this deal, there are a few reasons. This kills 2 birds with 1 stone for both teams. Number 1, we need to get rid of Jawan Taylor. We've talked about this over and over again. He's not a starting caliber tackle in this league. I think he's a liability. I think his penalty issues make him not worth starting. And from Miami's perspective, they have offensive line issues too. Austin Jackson, one of their offensive tackles, is out with a toe injury. He needs further evaluation and is being considered week to week at this point. But getting to the most important part of this whole story, as much as from a purely football standpoint, a reunion with Hill could make sense, the reality is, I don't think this this is a situation the Chiefs want to touch right now. The organization has a history of avoiding players with serious pending legal issues, and domestic violence allegations are simply something that isn't worth the risk, regardless of on-field talent. The Chiefs don't want to be associated with such a complicated legal situation when it comes to domestic violence issues, especially considering Hill's previous history in this area. Completely changing subjects, but still within the team's structural problems, we have much more serious issues that need to be addressed immediately. Andy Reid needs to fix his game plans, and the data shows exactly why this is urgent. Since losing Tyreek Hill, Mahomes' average depth of target has plummeted dramatically, from 9.7 yards in 2018 to below 8 yards in each of the last 4 seasons, according to Pro Football Focus. His last 2 seasons have hovered at or below 7 yards, proving that Kansas City's offense has become considerably less explosive. The problem isn't just Matt Nagy, although many fans point the finger at him. Nagy was promoted from quarterback's coach to offensive coordinator in 2023 after Eric Bieniemy's departure, and since then the Chiefs have fallen from top 5 in total offense 2018 to 2022, including 3 times in first place, to 9th in 2023 and 17th in 2024. The criticism isn't unfounded. Najee was already fired by the Bears after 4 seasons precisely for similar offensive problems. The deeper analysis reveals that Reid has developed a dangerous tendency to become too specific and narrow-minded in his game plans. They get too locked into individual players having matchups they want to exploit. First, it was Rashee Rice dominating 33.3% of targets, second highest in the NFL behind only Malik Nabers. Then when they lost Rice, they tried to simply transfer everything to Xavier Worthy. When that didn't work and Worthy got hurt, they were absolutely lost. Reid has an interesting philosophy of saving specific plays for crucial moments. He literally saved a play from the 2020 Super Bowl against the 49ers to use against the Bills in the AFC Championship. But the problem is that this save it for later mentality has extended to basic aspects of the offense. They can't use Travis Kelce enough now and wear him out for the end of the season, but they also can't depend on a 35-year-old guy to carry the entire offense when the initial game plan doesn't work. Connecting these offensive problems with practical execution, the situation becomes even more critical when you look at the specific numbers. It's absolutely apparent that you can't do what they did last week and not have Robert Tonyan, who's been screaming all preseason, on the field for just 5 snaps. This is ridiculous when you consider that in the 2024 playoffs, the Chiefs utilized 13 personnel formation, 1 running back, and 3 tight ends on an incredible 23.7% of their offensive snaps, 25 more plays than any other team. On those plays, they averaged 5.9 yards, including 5.5 yards per rush. Mahomes completed 5 of 7 passes for 49 yards with a touchdown in that formation. But here's the kicker. During the regular season, the Chiefs used 13 personnel on just 7.4% of their offensive snaps. It was a minuscule part of the attack. Reid literally saved this versatility for the playoffs, which worked at the time, but now shows a problematic philosophy of not using all available tools during the regular season. Tonyan has to play more against the Eagles. He has to give you a slightly different look, and by that I mean being multiple. They want to use 11 personnel predominantly, but you have to be able to go to your 3 tight end sets. You have to be able to stay in double and actually attack out of it. You have to be able to get into 13 and run the damn ball. The running game issue is even more frustrating when you look at the data. The Chiefs have been consistently inefficient in explosive ground plays. They gained 10 or more yards on just 4% of their rushing attempts, the lowest rate of any NFL team since 2016, according to NFL Pro. But when they actually establish the ground game, it works. They have a 51.3% success rate on rushes, which ranks second in the NFL behind only the Rams. The problem is the mentality. Matt Nagy admitted they changed the purpose of the ground game to keep the offense on schedule and out of 3rd and long instead of creating explosive plays. This is a defensive philosophy for a team with Patrick Mahomes. When you have the best quarterback in the world, you should be using the running game to create play action and favorable situations for explosive passes, not just to stay safe. The offensive line issues are perhaps the most concerning because they represent a direct threat to Patrick Mahomes' health. Jawan Taylor has become a penalty nightmare that's consistently costing the offense. Since joining the Chiefs in 2023, Taylor has led the entire NFL in penalties with 20 in 2023 and 16 in 2024. In week 1 of 2025, he maintained the destructive pace with 4 penalties, 2 false starts at crucial moments, and 2 holdings that disrupted the rare moments of momentum the Chiefs' offense tried to find. GM Brett Veach essentially sent Taylor a warning after drafting Josh Simmons in the first round, signaling that his job isn't secure. Taylor allowed 43 pressures on 761 pass-blocking snaps last season and accumulated an incredible 19 penalties as right tackle. Andy Reid was direct about it. He's gotta fix it. That's the bottom line. Taylor could save the Chiefs about $20 million if released after the 2025 season, and they've already invested $30 million in DJ Humphries as an alternative. Josh Simmons, who should be the long-term solution at left tackle, is recovering from a torn patellar tendon that prematurely ended his 2024 season at Ohio State. Before the injury, Simmons had allowed just one quarterback hurry with 0 hits or sacks allowed on 158 pass blocking snaps. The previous season, he gave up just 10 hurries, 4 hits, and 1 sack on 443 pass blocking snaps. The situation gets more complicated with Kingsley Suamataia, who was an absolute failure as left tackle in 2024. His technique and get off from his stance proved to be well below NFL law and standards. Reid acknowledged that Mike Caliendo will also be competing for the left guard job, showing that even Suamataia's position as a starter isn't guaranteed. The brutal analysis is that the Chiefs gave up 41 sacks last season, putting them 16th in the NFL, not catastrophic, but far from championship caliber. When Patrick Mahomes was sacked 6 times in a single game in the Super Bowl, that wasn't just a bad performance. It was a brutal indictment of a line that buckled when it mattered most. That collapse didn't just end their dream of a historic three-peat, it sent the front office back to the drawing board. Moving to the defensive side of the ball, the problems are even more complex and concerning. The Chiefs' secondary plummeted from a top 5 unit in 2023 to middle of the pack in 2024, and much of this decline was due to Jalen Watson's injury that caused him to miss all but 6 regular season games. Watson fractured both his fibula and tibia, putting his season at risk and forcing dramatic changes to the defensive scheme. Before Watson's injury in Week 8, Kansas City had one of the NFL's best defenses, but after that, the defense lost its obvious trump card. Without Watson, defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo was forced to move Trent McDuffie outside and put safety Shamari Connor in the slot. To put it mildly, that could have gone better. McDuffie is arguably the NFL's best cornerback, leading all players at the position in advanced coverage grade over the past 2 seasons, but taking him out of his natural position created a negative domino effect. The pass rush situation is equally problematic. The Chiefs finished 11th in pressure rate in 2024, 35.7%, but were slightly worse with just 39 sacks, the 18th most in the league. George Karlaftis led the team with 8 sacks, but his 11.9% pressure rate left a lot to be desired and was a step back from his sophomore season. Mike Dana played the most snaps opposite Karlaftis, and while Felix Anudike-Uzomah did get on the field a bit more in 2024, he still posted a disappointing 8.2% pressure rate with 2.5 sacks. Chris Jones remains the star of the unit, but even he's guessing at plays instead of dominating like he should. The problem isn't just individual talent, it's systemic. Against the Chargers, 2 themes were recurring for Spagnuolo's unit. The defensive line couldn't contain or pressure Justin Herbert, and the secondary couldn't keep track of his receivers. Ladd McConkey found hole after hole in the Chiefs' zone, and Quentin Johnston somehow looked like a competent NFL wideout. The most concerning analysis is that this isn't new. It's already a pattern that's extended through an offseason. Spagnuolo and Dave Merritt need to be able to make adjustments, but it seems like they're stuck in schemes that don't work anymore. You can't put Jaden Hicks on a slot wide receiver anymore. You can't think you're going to be able to pull that off. The defense was seeing 68% 3 and 4 man deep zones, which should be an advantage for the running game, but even that didn't work consistently. The coaching philosophy has become increasingly a fundamental problem in Kansas City. The organization has a history of being player-friendly in the locker room and meeting rooms, which worked when they were winning consistently, but when you're not winning, this permissive approach isn't supposed to be this way. They need a little tough love. They have to be the dad, not the grandpa at this point. The problem goes beyond just being nice to players. Reid has a tendency to always promote internally and is loyal to his guys to a fault. Spagnuolo coached under Reid during their time together at the Philadelphia Eagles, so even that hire was made with familiarity. Nagy was quarterback's coach in 2022 before being promoted to offensive coordinator in 2023. This blind loyalty is preventing necessary changes that could breathe new life into the offense. Many believe that both Mahomes and Reid could benefit from replacing Najee with someone outside of Reid's coaching tree, potentially giving them a different perspective. But based on Reid's history of building his coaching staff, that's very unlikely to happen. Reid almost always promotes internally, and this philosophy is starting to hinder the team's development. The most honest analysis is that the good vibes mentality throughout the entire offseason helps when you're a winner, but when you're not winning, you need adjustments. They have to get more out of these players. They have to push these players more. And I know the coaching staff will say you're just overreacting, but it's not overreacting. It's a pattern that's already extended through an offseason and continues into the regular season. A little tough talk now, a little challenging even your stars who aren't named Patrick Mahomes, because he's the only one who had an above expectation performance against the Chargers. That's what has to happen for them to get this season back on track. It's an imperative if we're going to see anything good come down the line, because these problems aren't new, and we saw exactly the same issues in the Super Bowl against the Eagles. What worries me most is that these problems aren't new. We saw exactly the same issues in the Super Bowl against the Eagles. The lack of multiple offensive options, the overdependence on few players, the problems in the secondary, the inability to make adjustments when the initial game plan doesn't work. If they don't learn from these mistakes quickly, this season could derail sooner than anyone imagines.